Welcome everybody to our event on the evolution of device management. My name is Stephen Vogt. I am a Senior Solutions Engineer here at Kanji. Prior to Kanji, I was at Apple for about the last 15 in various roles in retail, professional services, and the enterprise space. Today we're going to be talking about device management and how it is evolving for IT and security teams. I have several panelists joining me. First, I want to start by introducing Bradley Chambers. Bradley, welcome.
Thanks for having me. I'm glad to be here. I'm always ready to talk about people using Apple at work.
Awesome. Yeah, Bradley is a freelance writer for 9to5Mac, covering Apple and enterprise. He is also the digital and web marketing manager at Cribble, and previously ran IT for an Apple-focused school for 12 years. Welcome.
And I would still like to add that my favorite computer is still the PowerBook. That's still the best computer Apple's ever made.
One of mine too. Joel, I want to welcome you. Joel Bruner, he is the Senior Mac Endpoint Engineer at Elastic. He is passionate about Mac and has been that way since he started his career in 2000. He managed over 30,000 Mac systems for companies like Elastic, Walmart, IBM, WPP, and Havas. So he is also, if you don't know this, he's an avid shell scripter, and he's constantly trying to automate himself out of a job, and he likes to share his code and insights on his Brew Nerd blog and GitHub. Did I pronounce that right, Joel? Brew Nerd, right?
Sure did.
Awesome.
Yeah, you got it.
Welcome. All right, Stephen Malone, I want to welcome you. Stephen moved to Nashville, actually, to play music and toured with bands for over 10 years. I have to ask, Stephen, what is your favorite music production app?
Like my favorite DAW.
Yeah, what's your favorite DAW?
For recording, Logic Pro.
Logic
without a
Pro.
doubt.
Good,
yeah.
Right answer. That is the right answer. All right, Stephen moved to Nashville to play music, and he fell into IT working at Apple Retail for several years and realized his passion for technology and helping people. For the last 2 years, he's worked at Built Technologies and is responsible for the overhaul, implementation, and configuration of Built's directory services, endpoint management, and Apple deployment. He's also rolled out a streamlined, comprehensive onboarding experience for new users. Welcome, Stephen. Always glad to see fellow Apple Retail alums.
Thanks for having me, man. Really stoked about this, and always happy to talk about Kanji any day with anyone.
Awesome. All right, I want to start by just setting the stage. We've seen how device management has really changed and evolved over the years, so I want to take a moment to just ground us in its definition. Joel, if you had to define device management for your CEO, maybe you just recently did this when you joined Elastic, what would you say? How do you define device management?
Well, if it was to the CEO, and I'm flattered that you think I get some FaceTime with him. Well, I think CEOs are more aware of the threats that they face, but in general, you would say a CEO maybe doesn't care how the sausage is made, except the sausage is made with your computer now. Like, that's the how of it. So, it depends on what are they looking for, right? Is it cover your butt, right? Is it, audit, enforcement, compliance? Basically, they want to be protected from threats getting inside their company, right? That's, I'd say, the number one. Number two is like asset management. There's a lot of aspects, I think, to device management, right? Sometimes getting it back, protecting your, intellectual property. I'd say those would be the top ones. Of course, I'm an engineer at heart, so usually the CEO just wants do you have a solution or not, right? And then that's where it comes to you have a solution, the ideal, and then you have the real of how it's implemented, right? I'm sure we'll get more into that because that's where MDM has come from and maybe where it's going to go, right? In a more proactive way.
Bradley, at 9to5Mac, we've seen you describe complex topics to users all over the world. So how would you explain device management to the everyday user?
There are really two types of users. The ones that want a streamlined experience from their IT departments. They don't want to have to think about what apps I need, where to get them, are they updated, is my operating system updated, am I secure, how do I authenticate? They just want to sit down and work. And then there's the other types of people that kind of want to customize everything. I being in that camp, and I think that device management is important for both of them. But I say it's really more for the first category of the people that just see their Mac or their PC like they would a pen or a pencil. They don't really care. They just need to write. They just need to do their work. And now from an IT perspective, device management is ensuring that devices are set up the right way, they're in compliance, the settings are as they should, the policies are as they should, the encryption is as it should, and it can be reported on and audited. So again, we're in the middle of device update season for the Mac and iOS. And so if you're needing to push out macOS Monterey or you're needing to hold it back, you need to have that capability to do so. And without proper device management, you really can't.
Yeah, so for just to paraphrase, for the user, it's really all about giving them a great experience and making their job easier.
Yeah, absolutely. It's getting the technology out of the way. And you know me, like I'm the type that I've got a new iPhone coming in a few weeks. It'll be like, okay, like I won't hate setting it up. It'll kind of do its thing. And then you have people that like the thought of getting a new computer, they just see like hours of wasted time. Where us in the tech community, we're like, sweet, a new computer. There's other people that are like, oh yeah, that's just going to be like a huge waste of time. And so it's just making it where the tech is invisible. And that's ultimately, I think, where we want to be in the Apple camp. Because we've really moved past the place like, can you use Apple at work to Apple is just an equal peer to Windows in the workplace. And from an IT perspective, I would argue in some ways it's actually easier. And as someone that's been a Mac user for 15, 16 years, someone that managed Apple devices for over a decade, I just remember back when you couldn't even get Exchange email on a Mac without some third-party hacky plug-in. And the fact that I would argue it's actually easier to connect an Exchange server to a Mac than it is a PC, we've come a long way.
Yeah, absolutely. I would agree with that for sure. So if we think about that, that's actually a perfect segue, because if we think about where we're at today, right, we've defined MDM, device management, and if we think about where we are today, Joel, you manage devices every single day at Elastic. What's really changed in that last few years, maybe even the last 5 to 10 years, depending on how you look at it? Is there anything that's easier now?
Think back, well, Apple Business Manager, right, or DEP. I was looking back, like it only came about in 2015. Yet it feels like it's kind of second nature now. It's like, of course, that thing is, you're going to ABM enroll it, right? You don't have to think about like send the user that link for them to click on, and like that has gone away. So that's a lot easier, right? To get that enrollment without having to track down that user and say, are you enrolled? That's come a long way. The concept of zero touch, right? I think it depends on what environment you're in. I've been in quite a few, and I think it depends on what that company's paradigm is of how IT should work, right? Currently at Elastic, we drop ship everything to the end user. It doesn't come through IT centrally, whereas some places still have that mindset, right? IT's got to touch it first. They have to set it up, and then it goes out, and it just adds an extra layer of complexity. So business, I think, is coming around, a bit more, right? To realize the tighter they try to like control everything, that doesn't scale, right? To have an army IT workers going into a central location to get laptops to send back out, those logistics don't work, especially now, right? Post COVID, that just doesn't work. So MDM has really helped, right, with that zero touch drop ship directly to the end user. That's remarkable and unthinkable, right? You talk about 10 years ago, wouldn't have happened, right? So yeah, it's come a long way.
Absolutely. Yeah, and if I would have heard that statement, right, 5 years ago, and heard what you were doing, right, and drop shipping devices directly to users, I would have said, wow, Joel, that's really forward thinking. But I think that's where we are now, right? Like we are there. This is the current state. Right? So Stephen, just building off of that, is there anything with device management that is still a challenge for IT?
Yeah, I mean, thankfully, Kanji has made our deployment and management situation really easy and streamlined. But probably the biggest challenge, and to kind of echo something Bradley was saying, is there really are two types of users when it comes to computers in a business setting. You have your user who just sees their machine as a blunt instrument to just hammer in a nail and get a job done, and then they put it away and they forget about it. They don't think about how fast it works. They don't think about how good it looks. They just use it as a tool. And then there are people who are more like myself and probably like the rest of you who like want it super customized and tailored to your preferences and use very specific tools and things like that. We have a lot of that in our dev environment where when we onboard new developers, they're like, well, I use this really, really specific tool. Or they use a tool that is exclusively deployed through the App Store and they've bought it with their personal Apple ID. And they're like, well, I have the subscription. I want to be able to use it, things like that. But luckily, the way that Kanji integrates with Apple Business Manager and being able to utilize VPP and things like that, and also just being able to deploy custom packages, we can usually get, if not the same tool, a comparable or better tool deployed to users. So that's usually the biggest challenge, but luckily, we're using a system that provides solutions for that. So
I appreciate that. I promise I didn't tell Stephen to say that, but just to kind of paraphrase.
I promise he didn't either.
Yeah. So just to paraphrase, so it's really about maybe not even so much the management as it is finding the solution in some cases that is what the users want to use or the equivalent to what they want to use.
Yeah. I mean, really, at least in our environment, from managing the devices, we don't really have that many challenges as far as deploying, maintaining, updating, so on and so forth. So, and that speaks to Kanji. It really does. Not being paid to say that.
Maybe Joel, back to you. I mean, you've done some stuff with endpoint protection and things like that. Do you find security is still a concern or anything like that, or where's the state? What is the state of that today?
Security with the Mac is, well, it's always a moving target now, isn't it? And new ways of approaching it, right? Apple's made changes, that kernel extensions are no longer now system extensions. A lot of novel things are being done with network monitoring, right? They're using network filters, content filters, that are MDM profiles, to route that through those apps. I think that's great because it's keeping those AV products from crashing your Mac, right? For the people that care about how their Mac runs, system extensions have been a real boon. And Apple has, introduced new ways to keep the Mac safer, but of course, like people like Patrick Wardle and other folks there, always got to poke it a little bit though, right? Keep them on the up and up and honest, right? So
awesome.
Yeah.
And Bradley, obviously as an author, you've probably seen a lot of different trends over the years. Like, has there been anything that's changed over the last few years that you found particularly surprising or unexpected, delightful, maybe undelightful?
One of the things I really would love to see kind of converge, I think is a real problem for IT professionals today, is because of hybrid work and remote work, we've just introduced so many variables to when problems occur. And so let's say you're on a video call like this and your video gets choppy. So you put in a ticket, with your IT team. Hey, video choppy during Zoom or whatever. It's like, if you're in IT, you're thinking, okay, like how do I? What do you mean about that? Like, because there's so many. You've now got you've got a Zoom, their ecosystem of networks. You've got the home network, which you have no control over, and then you've got a Mac. And so it's really, really difficult to try to isolate why problems occurred and how to keep them from happening in the past. And we've dealt with this in the office when you'd be in a situation when someone would say, hey, my Wi-Fi was slow yesterday. It's like, well, how do I figure that why the Wi-Fi was slow yesterday? This problem is just that times 100, because now let's say you manage 250 Macs of all remote employees. Well, now you have 250 networks that could potentially be a problem. And it could be even a situation where like they're just sitting too far from the router. Maybe their ISP stinks. Like there's just like that's really, really hard. And so what I'd love to see is some sort of like some sort of logging infrastructure that went into device management that could more analyze this. So like again, so let's say there's a way to determine why a Mac is running slow, why some sort of video conferencing tool is running slow, like that. Maybe again is as simple as like video conferencing logs being sent to the MDM after the fact, and so this can be sort of analyzed. It's just really, really hard to be an IT professional. It's really, really hard to be an IT professional with all remote employees, and I don't think people get like actually how hard it is to troubleshoot problems when you are not sitting in front of them and you don't manage anything about it other than the device.
Yeah, that's a good point. So really the surprise, right, is the fact that we now, are not focused on IT in the office. We are focused on IT on a much bigger scale, endpoints, times the thousands potentially.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, and it's everybody could be working somewhere differently at all times. And it's not even a situation to where people obviously travel before and you could chalk it up to, hey, like your hotel Wi-Fi stunk. But now it's like you end up becoming like, hey, run a speed test. What's your speed test? How far are you from router? What router do you have? Have you upgraded the firmware on your router? Oh, you don't know how? Let me Google that for you. Like, these are all things that are like, problems you really didn't deal with 2 years ago. And like, these are like massive, massive problems because certainly if you're in a situation where you're in a customer facing role, like you just have to have those video meetings working well. And it's just really, really hard to control all of those variables.
Yeah, for sure. And so if we kind of think towards, the future, right, and how device management is evolving, maybe for you, Stephen, how is device management changing what you do day to day? How is it, making it easier, more difficult? What's changing?
For me, at least, it really helps me focus more on projects and looking towards the future, planning, things like that, because with the way that we have everything set up, it's pretty streamlined and ubiquitous across our environment for the most part. So when we add a new user, we deploy a device to them. They get whatever profile for whatever team they're on. We don't really ever have any problems with the onboarding process from that standpoint. So it frees up a lot of time. It negates a lot of the manual monotony of having to configure things and add things. The addition of the self-service portal, whenever that came out, was a huge thing that took, we probably got rid of 20% of our help desk tickets with that. So yeah, the biggest thing is that it frees up time, especially for me. We're approaching 300 users plus like 40 or 50 offshore developers. So it allows me to work on projects, work on configurations, do research, et cetera, et cetera. So
that's awesome. So you're spending some time up front building it, and then you're really, after that, it's a shift in your time of working on other projects because this device management over here is kind of taking care of a lot of what you used to have to go in front of a computer and hand jam or pick up somebody's device, for example.
Yeah. 100%. And I guess this kind of ties back a little bit to your last question, but we get a lot of users who are coming from a Windows environment, but they have a Mac at home, and they're expecting they're either expecting everything just to be completely unusable like it was in their Windows environment previously, or they're expecting like, oh, I'm going to use this just like I use my Mac at home. And so a lot of the tools that Kanji has given us has been able to transition those people who are used to using a Mac personally into using it as a business tool, but still having some of the benefits of the personalization aspects.
Yeah, for sure. And Joel, one thing that you told me is that you pretty much are. You love automation, and you might be automating yourself out of job. What do you think your job looks like in 2 years? Will it be completely automated? Will there be another Joel? What does that look like?
The universe never cooperates with that plan at all. New things will always be found to keep me busy. I am sure of that. my title has Mac in the name, right? Mac, and that's been my bread and butter for a long time. But I just wonder, in a few years, you start getting like 2 terabytes of storage in the iPad Pro, and the developer tools, right? Will Xcode get over to iPad? Can you totally live on an iPad? Is the question, right? Well, I have to drop Mac from my title, right? Will I be just an Apple device, engineer? Is the question. Right now, right? I think there's still more tools for developing on the Mac, but trends are I think there's convergence that's going to happen in some way, right? We want parity across our devices. Kind of already have that, right? With Apple Arcade. Subscribe to that. You can play on your iPad, your TV, right? Your computer. When all your devices have parity and you can just hand off from one to the other. That's probably what the future is going to look like. But for business, I think an aspect is still security and, in a way, observing, right? And seeing what their users are up to, in a way, right? AV products are still on the Mac. They're not really on the iPad, right? You can't get into that walled garden, so to speak. So that might still be this decider for business that, you're still on a Mac because we want to see what you're up to. We want to run our, digital loss prevention, our DLP products on that. So, that might still be the headwinds that Apple's going to face as, they love people to use all their devices, but business may say, not quite yet, right?
Yeah.
So we'll
yeah, that's a good point you bring up about, just kind of the difference between the security model, right, between Mac OS and versus iOS or iPad OS. Do you foresee, like, especially with Apple Silicon and T2 chip, things like that, do you foresee a change on the Mac? Like, is there still going to be a strong need to have that endpoint protection on the Mac? What does that look like?
Trust but verify, I think somebody said, right? So, do you trust that everything is hunky-dory in iOS land all the time? I think business who are running those risk formulas, right, and trying to calculate what their risk is and say, it's not worth it right now. I mean, right, tons of businesses are on iPhone, no denying it, on iPad. But for certain kinds of work, right, government, smart card access, things like that, still, I think is going to be on the Mac. Yeah.
So maybe you did. That was great. That was great. So maybe I'll pass it back to you, Bradley. Really, it'll be a question for all three of you. But along those lines, where do you think device management needs to evolve to? I know you kind of touched on this a little bit already, but what's the missing piece? Is it security? Is it automation, integration? Something about being more user centric? What's the key?
One of the things I've really always wanted Apple to build out an ecosystem for is device state, to where, similar to the way Chrome OS works, to where you can be typing on a Chromebook, wait 2 seconds to let it sync, close it, throw it out the window, pick up another one, log in, everything's the same. It's not quite there on the Mac, and I really am wondering how device swaps are going to go in maybe another year or so with it. Like, if you look at your typical 3-year refresh cycle for employees, these employees who are working from home, maybe have nowhere near the corporate office, how are they going to migrate? How are they going to get their devices from here to there, their settings and all that, maybe their custom settings? And I think that's just going to be a real challenge for IT. And I don't know if it's tied to a managed Apple ID or something in the MDM where you can say serial number to serial number transfer, something. But basically where a user could say have their dock set up the way they wanted it, their background, all their settings the way they want it. And then they get a new Mac and they just sign in and it's all there, just like the way it's on Chrome OS. And again, it's better than it used to be, but it's just there close enough to be annoying. And so I would love to see Apple, and that's really only, I think, an Apple thing they can do, and it really makes sense for something they would kind of hook into the MDM vendors for on kind of managing where this device is at. Because I really stress about what happens if you've got somebody that's in sales that has an important conference tomorrow or customer meeting tomorrow, and their laptop breaks today. what do you do there? Like, how do you like, do you end up like just shipping everybody 2 laptops? You tell them to keep, or maybe you tell them to keep their old one as a backup. Do you say, hey, run to Best Buy and get one and return it, and we get you a new one? Like, just get like, there's just so many weird things there that like are hard for IT, are hard for end users when you're not in a situation where you could like have a help desk you could walk to and get a new laptop in a pinch. And yeah, there's some work I think Apple
really around that
there.
migration piece. It sounds like the end of the life cycle potentially, and the beginning of the new life cycle.
Yeah, and I will say, like, one of the things Apple did this year that I think is a game changer for a lot of IT professionals is erase all content and settings. I don't know that people realize like how much time that's going to save people. The whole securely offboarding a device with user data was very time consuming before. Like, I would even argue it could take up to an hour. Now, again, you could do 5 devices in an hour, but like it just was time consuming. And because Apple did the hard work on separating user data from the OS, I mean, it's really just how it is on iOS, like where you could, your iOS devices from MDM, you click a button and they're wiped. And then the same thing with macOS Monitor, you're going to have the same thing where, again, employee gets a new device, you verify it's up and running. It's like, hey, I'm leaving it on Wi-Fi for 10 seconds. I'm going to wipe that computer, and it's secure, and you can ship it back. And that's really going to be a game changer for large distributed organizations.
Yeah, I know. I'm personally really, really excited about that. That's out of all the features, new phones, everything. I'm almost most excited about that. Stephen, I'd love to get your kind of perspective. Where does MDM need to evolve to? What's that missing piece?
I totally agree with what Bradley was saying about the save state piece. That is something that I've been thinking a lot about because, we have all of our machines locked down, like from an external device standpoint. So we don't allow any like external media reading or writing at all. So Migration Assistant is, even though you could, I guess, technically do it over Wi-Fi, yeah, we don't use that. And it's really not that big of a problem. But like Bradley was saying, if you have a salesperson or, God forbid, an executive who has a ton of stuff on their machine, and we all know that they're supposed to be saving it to Google Drive or OneDrive or whatever. They're not. They never are, and they're going to lose some $10 million deal or something like that. So like to have the ability to, I hate to say like restore a device from a backup because, that opens up a whole other can of worms and, need for additional security measures and stuff like that. But yeah, if you could like have a device image that you could copy to another device securely, that would be a game changer for sure. Especially, for remote people, if you could ship somebody a device and like resume a save state upon opening that device, that would be insane. And, we would all look like heroes because they're not going to know how that's working. So like, oh my God, you're a wizard.
And would you say, is that a function of device management? Is it a function of the OS? Is that a function of the cloud content providers? Like, where does that responsibility actually sit?
Obviously, like that's got to come from Apple, but I think that could be a component of device management. I don't know how that would look because I'm not an engineer by any means. But if there was some way to either store that or manage that through an MDM, that would be cool. That would be really cool. But yeah, obviously the major responsibility there, lies with the manufacturer, and I'm sure there's some way they could, if they would make iCloud a business tool as well, there'd be a lot of features that an MDM provider could integrate with there as well.
Yeah, and I think we're getting closer.
I'm just shooting from the hip.
Yeah, it'll be really interesting to
I
see
think
where
so
we're
too.
at, right, in that 2 years. Joel, what about you? Are things automated enough? Like, what do you think is the missing piece?
For the missing piece for transitioning, over to
just
iOS
kind of like the
devices,
missing
or
piece
where do you
to
see
like
the question?
what's the key to unlocking device management in the future? Where does it need to evolve to?
It's only limited by our imagination, right? I think we think of MDM device management as like, we're going to lock this thing, we're going to do that thing, and sometimes I don't know, that's a little too inflexible. And Apple's good at bringing old ideas back, and we're like, hey, is that new? And they're like, no, we had that 10 years ago, remember? And I think back to MCX controls, and that you could have always, often, once, right? There was a gradient of enforcement levels, and MDM kind of was just like my way or the highway. It's on or off, and it was very binary. I just wonder, is there room in the future for MDM to get that flexibility back, right? Can Apple engineer in some of those ideas from MCX, because maybe you want to set the dock one way, but then you don't want it locked for the end of time, right? So, right, there's certain things like this, fine for a kiosk, but for someone who just wants some icons and then add more, there's a little inflexibility right there. So I think, yeah, flexibility and non-binary thinking, some fuzzy logic, to use a phrase from the 90s. That can come back new again too. Bring it back.
Bradley, you mentioned, kind of the term like a device state. One of the announcements this year at WWDC was around declarative device management and how it was had a focus on device state. How do you see that kind of playing into this picture?
Well, it is. I feel like this declarative model is something that is kind of setting the groundwork for what the future of MDM is, and it's really. I think this is the benefit of Apple buying Fleet Smith. I guess a year and a half ago at this point. I think we're seeing the fruits of that acquisition, and I really think that all device management vendors are going to, and ultimately all customers are going to benefit from Apple owning a vendor, because that's going to kind of help show them like where the pain points are. Obviously nothing is perfect, but like when I really think about how important zero touch deployment is for the work we do now. And then I see I feel like declarative is going to be kind of the next evolution. It's almost like a retooling of what MDM should be and how it should function, and moves it to more what I feel like is the Chrome OS model. I mean, I think I don't like Chromebooks, but there is something to be said for that model from an IT perspective of kind of how that seamlessly syncs back and forth. And declarative MDM, again, it's not something that is the sexiest thing you're going to read about all year. But the important things you're going to see in the next 3 to 5 years are going to be as a result of the foundation that declarative technology brings.
All right. So as we start to bring things to a close, I want to ask each of you the question: if you could offer, one piece of advice to the Apple practitioners out there on how to prepare for the future of device management, what would it be? And Stephen, let's go ahead and start with you.
Get a good relationship with your local Apple account executive. That's been a huge help for me. I mean, obviously, like having good vendors and like good tools has been great, but having a really good relationship with our account executive has been awesome for our endpoint environment, but also just acquiring devices and things like that. So yeah, if you're gonna have a large Apple footprint, make friends with your account executive, be their best friend, get their phone number, send them a gift.
Awesome, love it. How about you, Joel? What's that one piece of advice you would offer?
Just one? Keep it simple, stupid.
It's a good one.
I mean, really, there's a lot of complexity is every day, is coming. MDM helps manage that complexity, right? But there's always new payloads coming in, right? Maybe it's easier to put it out. Maybe you need less people, but there's always complexity. And it's like you're a sculptor, and you just want to take things away to keep it to its simplest, purest form, right? Without points of failure, right? That's, as we've learned in distributed world, the minimizing points of failure, is what we're all about, and trying to, just let someone accomplish what they want. Sorry, that might be two pieces of advice. Is you can't study for the future, right? So just focus on what you want the outcome to be, right? you align with that. What does the business want, right? That frictionless onboarding, what is the outcome you want? And then you find out what that technology is, and you see if Apple's caught up or one of the other fine vendors out there.
That's really good. And Bradley, how about
Sounds
you?
like I was just gonna say that makes me think of Steve Jobs perspective of start with the user experience and work backwards. I mean, same thing with your management practices.
Yeah.
I really think it's important for those that focus on Apple and the enterprise to look at themselves as innovation practitioners as much as you are IT. We all remember the Nick Burns from the Saturday Night Live skits. We remember the jerk IT person, and it kind of taking a step back too, like, don't try to act like you're the all-knowing gatekeeper because you're IT. You're in control of everything. You see everything. You need to see yourself as you're a business enablement professional. You help people use their technology better. So, like, if you've got a really awesome workflow on your Mac on how you do something, like, share that with the people at your team. They that may help them. That may save them an hour a week. And so look at yourself as like an innovation center, because if you don't, you're a cost center. And I'm always a big fan of being in the innovation business rather than just being a sunk cost for a company.
Love it. Man, you guys have had so many good quotes today. Like, I feel like I want to like write them on my wall. They're so good. So thank you. Man, I can't believe how fast this time has went already. We're going to bring things to a close now.
Oh, wow.
So I want to thank each of you. Thank you, Bradley, Joel, and Steven, for being our panelists today. I hope everybody enjoyed today's event. We have more like this coming up, so be sure to tune back in. Attend our Kanji Passport launch event on November 3rd. And if you are interested in trying Kanji, I would invite you to go to kanji.io/start to get started. So thank you all, and we will see you next time.